welcome back to another Sinister Novel with your spooky host with the most, Raz. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another reading with your host, Raz. Tonight's story is going to be of a different type. Instead of reading one of our sinister novels, we're going to take on something a little bit more grown up tonight. So this is my warning to you that tonight's story is going to be for a more mature audience. If that's not for you, then no worries, because I will be bringing another sinister novel in a couple of days, just to make sure that you're satisfied too. Anyways, with all of that in mind, I also want to remind everyone, if you write these stories and you want somebody to read them, please send me a message. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's sit back, relax, and get ready to read. Tonight's story is titled The Mistake. The briefing room was underground. Everything about Task Force Apex was underground, literally and figuratively. Commander James Reeves stood in front of 6 of the most lethal soldiers alive and activated the holographic display. The image flickered to life, a structure, massive, ancient, carved into a mountain in northern Mongolia. "This is Facility 7, Reeves said. His voice was rough from 30 years of smoking and giving orders. "We've been tracking signals from this location for the past 18 months. Signals that don't match any known technology. Signals that shouldn't exist." The team watched. Captain Marcus Chen, the team leader. Lieutenant Sarah Voss, demolition specialist. Sergeant James Ghost Morrison, sniper. Corporal David Zhao, hacker. Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, field medic. And Major Thomas Blake, the brutal son of a bitch who handled cleanup. 3 days ago, Reeves continued, those signals intensified. We've intercepted communications indicating something is preparing to leave that facility. We don't know what. We don't know why. But our analysis believe it's a threat to our national security. How big a threat? Chen said. The kind where if it leaves that mountain, we might not have a country to protect anymore, Reeves said flatly. That was all they needed to hear. The insertion was clean. They trained for this for months, though they didn't know the specifics until 3 hours before the operation. That's how things worked with Apex. Need-to-know basis. Right now, they needed to know how to get into an ancient mountain structure and neutralize whatever threat was inside. The helicopter dropped them at the base of the mountain. Night vision goggles. Assault rifles loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Explosives packed into combat vests. Enough firepower to level a small town. "Remember," said Chen over the encrypted comms, "in and out. We eliminate the threat and exfil within 40 minutes. Ghost, you hold the perimeter from the north edge. Rodriguez, you're with me. Everyone else, gear check." They checked their gear. Weapons ready, ammunition loaded, explosives armed. They were as prepared as men could be. They had no idea. The entrance was massive. Not modern carved, ancient carved. The walls were covered in symbols that none of them recognized. The kind of symbols that made your brain hurt if you look at them for too long. Voss was the first to comment on it. "These symbols aren't any language I've ever seen," she said. "Irrelevant," said Blake. "We're here to kill what's inside, not read poetry." They moved in. The corridor extended deep into the mountain. Their flashlights caught stone walls that seemed to absorb light. The temperature dropped with every step. By the time they reached the inner chamber, Their breath was visible, and frost was forming on their tactical gear. "Command, we're at the inner chamber," Chen reported. "No resistance so far." "Proceed with caution," Reeves said from command. "Sensors show significant energy output from that location." The chamber was impossible. It was massive. Too massive to fit in the mountain they'd entered through. The walls extended up into the darkness their lights couldn't reach. The floor was perfectly smooth stone, unmarked and reflecting their flashlights like a mirror. And in the center of the chamber, suspended in the air above a circular platform, was something none of them could quite perceive. It wasn't invisible, but their eyes couldn't focus on it properly. Looking at it directly caused vertigo and nosebleeds. Looking at it peripherally, they could almost see a shape, a presence, something that existed in more dimensions than their mind could process. "What the hell is that?" Rodriguez whispered. "Target acquired," Blake said, raising his rifle. "Wait," Chen said. "Command, are you seeing this?" Static crackled back. "We're seeing energy signatures off the charts," Reeves said. "Readings we can't classify. But whatever it is, it's the source of the signals. Proceed with termination." Chen looked at his team. He had been leading men into combat for 15 years. He'd taken lives. He'd made impossible decisions. But something about this felt wrong. "Stand by," Chen said. The presence in the center of the chamber moved. Not physically. It moved in a way that hurt to perceive, a shifting of reality around it, and then it spoke. Not in words, in understanding, in pure knowledge downloaded directly into their minds. "Stop!" The command was absolute. It bypassed their ears and spoke directly to their consciousness. "What was that?" Voss gasped, dropping to one knee, blood streaming from her nose. The presence spoke again. "You cannot kill me. You do not have that capacity. Leave this place and live." Chen stood paralyzed. Everything in his military training told him this was wrong. Wrong to be here. Wrong to proceed. Wrong, wrong, wrong. But Blake had different instincts. "It's trying to intimidate us," Blake said. "Psychological warfare. Fire!" Blake opened fire. The bullets passed through the space where the presence was. They didn't hit anything. They just passed through empty air and struck the far wall of the chamber. The presence reacted. The reaction wasn't a scream. It was worse. It was the sound of the universe rejecting something, of reality convulsing. The walls of the chamber began to crack. The ground shifted. The very air seemed to thicken and press down on them. "Get out!" Chen screamed. They ran. Behind them, the chamber was collapsing. The presence was moving, pursuing, not with physical speed, but with some other kind of momentum that made distance meaningless. They made it back to the corridor. The entrance was in sight, but the presence was still coming. The extraction helicopter was waiting. Ghost radioed from the ridge. "Contacts coming out of the mountain. Multiple signatures. What are you running from?" "Everything," Chen gasped, hauling himself into the helicopter. "Get us out of here, now!" The helicopter lifted, but something came out of the mountain with them. Not something they could see clearly, but something that made the helicopter's instruments go haywire. The pilots fought the controls as the aircraft pitched and yawed. "What's happening?" one of the pilots screamed. "Just fly," Chen shouted. They made it 50 miles before the helicopter died. Not crash, died. Every instrument went dark. Every system shut down. The rotors stopped spinning. They dropped. But they didn't fall like a normal helicopter. They fell slowly, too slowly, as if gravity had simply lost interest in them. They hit the ground hard, but alive. The team scrambled out of the wreckage. "Status," Chen barked. "Blake's pinned," Rodriguez said. "Broken leg, maybe worse." "Move him," Chen ordered. They grabbed Blake and ran. Behind them, the presence descended. It reached the helicopter and the metal simply corroded. Not rust, entropy. The aircraft aged decades in seconds, crumbling to dust. What is that thing? Voss screamed. Keep moving, Chen yelled. They made it to the extraction point. A satellite phone had been pre-cached there, buried in a waterproof container. Chen grabbed it and called Reeves. Sir, we encountered something in that facility. We don't know what. Blake engaged it. It's pursuing us. Define pursuing, Reeves said calmly. Chen watched as a tree behind them simply died. Not fell. Died. The bark turned gray. The wood turned to dust. The roots withered and crumbled into nothing. Sir, whatever we shot at, it's not dead. It's very, very alive, and it's angry. Silence on the line. Get back to base, Reeves said finally. We need to contain this. Contain what? Chen asked. The threat. Get back to base. They made it back with Ghost's help. The sniper provided suppressing fire against something that couldn't be hit. Voss rigged explosive traps that slowed whatever was chasing them. Rodriguez kept Blake alive despite injuries that should have killed him. Chen led them out of Mongolia. By the time they reached the safe house in Beijing, Blake was unconscious from blood loss and fever. The presence had stopped pursuing them around Mongolia's border, as if something was holding it back. But only just. It was still there, on the edge of their perception. Waiting, hungry, angry. Reeves brought them into the underground base a week later. Command Center Delta was built under the Pentagon. 3 levels down, shielded against every kind of surveillance, staffed with the best military scientists and strategists the United States government could assemble. They all looked terrified. You killed a god, one of them said, a scientist named Patricia Hollis. That's impossible, Chen said. You didn't kill it, Hollis continued, but you mortally wounded it. And now it's dying the only way that something that ancient and powerful can die. By destroying the world? Rodriguez asked. Exactly. The briefing room was silent, except for Hollis's voice. She had been researching the signals from Facility 7 for 3 years. She traced them back through history. The structure in Mongolia had been built 6,000 years ago. The presence inside had been dormant for that entire time. What was it dormant from? Chen asked. From the previous time it tried to enslave Earth, Hollis said. The ancient cultures called it different names. The Sumerians called it Anu. The Greeks called it a Titan. The Chinese called it Tao. But they all described the same entity. A being of vast intelligence and power that came to Earth and tried to establish dominion over humanity. How was it stopped? Voss asked. A coalition of humans, led by someone or something we've lost historical records of. They trapped it in a state of dormancy, carved a prison around it, built protective wards. And we just blew up the prison, Blake said from his hospital bed. You damaged it, Hollis corrected. The entity is now in the process of dying, and a dying god is more dangerous than a living one. The reports started coming in 48 hours later. A massive storm system forming over the Pacific. Weather patterns completely unpredictable. Pattern grids failing across the west coast for no apparent reason. Satellites going offline. Communication systems failing. And worse, sightings. People had reported seeing something in the sky. Something that literally hurt to look at. Something that was making the sky itself wrong. It's manifesting, Hollis said in the emergency briefing. The entity is literally tearing its way into our dimension. As it dies, it's pulling pieces of itself through. Reality is breaking down in the locations it's passing through. Where is it going? Reeves asked. Washington, D.C., Hollis said quietly. Because that's where it could cause the most damage. That's where it could enslave the most people with its dying breath. That's where its vengeance could be most absolute. The entity reached the East Coast in 72 hours. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The sky turned black. Not sunset black. Reality-breaking black. People who looked directly at it went mad. Their minds couldn't process what they were seeing. They ran into traffic. They climbed buildings. They hurt themselves in an attempt to escape what they were experiencing. Military assets were dispatched. Fighters tried to intercept it. The entity didn't destroy them. The fighters simply ceased to exist in the presence of it. Not shot down, not destroyed, just unmade. The pilots, too. Reality seemed to rewind to a point of where they did not exist. Nuclear weapons? Someone suggested. Will do nothing, Hollis said. She'd been right about everything so far. You can't nuke a god, especially not a dying god that doesn't exist entirely in our dimension. Tanks rolled toward Washington. The entity passed through them like they were toys. Armor didn't matter. The weapons didn't matter. The soldiers didn't matter. 12,000 soldiers were dispatched to hold the creature back. 0 survived. It wasn't a battle. It was an absolute annihilation. Chen watched the news footage from the bunker. The entity was now hovering over Washington, D.C. The sky around it had turned inside out. You could see stars where the sky should be. You could see things in those stars that definitely did not belong. We have to evacuate the city, Chen said. There's nowhere to evacuate to, Reeves replied. It's spreading. This creature is dying, and in its death throes, it's expanding its presence. It will cover the entire planet within a week. So we just surrender, Chen asked. I don't know, Reeves said. But for the first time, Jane Reeves looked genuinely uncertain. It was Rodriguez who made the suggestion. We go back, she said. We go back to Facility 7. We finish what we started. We actually kill it this time. We don't have the firepower, Blake said. He could walk again. Barely. We don't need firepower, Rodriguez said. We need knowledge. We need to understand what that thing is. And there has to be something in that facility that explains how to kill it, how to destroy it properly. The facility is probably destroyed, Voss said. Or it's still standing, Rodriguez countered. Because that thing we fought, it came from inside the facility. It didn't destroy its prison. It escaped it. Reeves looked at Chen. Your team, he said. Your decision. Chen thought about the creature, about the millions dying because they'd been sent to kill it, about the fact that if they just left it alone, none of this would be happening. We go back, Chen said. We end this. The insertion into Mongolia was different this time. The team was smaller. Just Chen, Rodriguez, Voss, and Zhao. Ghost was dead, killed in the initial attack. Blake was healing, but not combat ready. Morrison had volunteered to stay behind with the command staff. The mountain was still standing, but it was wrong. The entrance was sealed, not by human means, by something else. The stone had hardened to a diamond-like quality. No explosives could breach it. Zhao worked on the lock mechanism, if there was one. This is biomechanical, he said, pulling away panels of the stone that should have been solid. Or it was. It's decaying, like the entity is pulling back from it. He found a mechanism, ancient beyond measure, but still functional. The entrance opened. The corridors inside were different. The walls were crumbling. The air was thick with something that wasn't quite mist, as if the mountain itself was dying along with the entity. They reached the chamber. The platform where the entity had been suspended was empty, but the chamber wasn't abandoned. There were writings on the walls, the same symbols they'd seen before, but now they could read them. Not with their eyes, with their minds. The symbols were teaching them. It's a prison, Rodriguez breathed. This is the mechanism. This is how they trapped it. The symbols explained everything. The entity was not merely powerful. It existed partially outside of normal space-time. It was a being that had existed before the current universe was properly formed, before reality had been fully solidified into its current configuration. It had come to Earth to harvest, to reshape humanity into worship slaves, to use Earth as a breeding ground for more of its kind. and it had been stopped by humanity's first great war. Not a physical war, a war of will. Billions of humans had united their consciousness, had burned their very souls into this final act of resistance, and had forced the entity into a partial hibernation. The prison was designed to keep it weakened, to prevent it from fully manifesting, to bind it to dormancy through constant pressure. And then Blake had fired a bullet that shattered that binding. Voss found something else. A chamber beneath a chamber. A vault. Inside was a weapon. Not a gun, not a bomb. A consciousness weapon. A device that could amplify a human's willpower. This is how they did it, Chen said. They used this to fight, to burn their consciousness against it. Can we use it? Rodriguez asked. We'd have to link to it, Zhao said, examining the device, and the link would probably kill us. Better than letting it kill everyone, Voss said. They brought the device back to base. Hollis examined it for 6 hours. Her conclusion was the same. The device would kill the entity, but it would require a human consciousness to link with it, to burn their will against the entity's existence. It would kill that person, absolutely, completely, and painfully. I'll do it, Chen said. No, Rodriguez said. I'll do it. You have to survive this, Chen said, to complete the mission. We all have to survive this, Rodriguez replied, for the mission. In the end, it was Zhao who made the decision. I'm the hacker, he said. I understand systems. I can link to this better than any of you. Let me do this. They didn't argue. They knew he was right. The device was brought to the site above the entity's manifestation. Zhao was strapped into it. The neural link was activated, and Zhao screamed. Not from pain, from the contact. The entity was aware of him. It was aware of what was happening. The sky split open, reality inverted. The entity came forth in its terrible glory, and every human being on the planet who looked directly at it went mad. Zhao's consciousness burned like a star. The willpower of one man amplified by ancient technology, burning itself against the dying god. The entity shrieked, a sound that broke windows across the entire city, a sound that made people's blood vessels rupture, a sound that was the death cry of an ancient being. And then, it was gone. Not destroyed, transcended, pulled back into whatever dimension it had been called from. The entity had no choice. The ancient mechanism gave it that choice. Be destroyed in this dimension, or retreat to your own. It chose retreat. Zhao was dead. Brain dead. Total and complete neural shutdown. The device had burned out his entire consciousness in the process of defeating the enemy. Chen held his best friend's body and felt nothing but guilt. Around the world, people slowly came to terms with what had happened. Millions had died in the entity's manifestation. Cities were destroyed. Governments had fallen. The world had nearly ended. And it was because Blake had pulled the trigger. Because Chen had led a team into a place they shouldn't have been. Because Command had deemed something a threat without understanding what they were threatening. If we just left it alone, Chen said to Rodriguez, none of this would have happened. If we'd left it alone, it would have woken up eventually, Rodriguez replied. At least now we know how to stop it. But that wasn't comfort. That was just the acceptance of failure. The world rebuilt. New governments rose. New militaries formed. New rules of engagement were established. And there were new facilities discovered. Facilities like the one in Mongolia. Ancient prisons holding things that humanity had fought before. Things that were sleeping. What do we do? Reeves asked in the next briefing. Chen looked at the satellite images of the 6 similar structures in the world. We leave them alone, he said. We monitor them. We study them. But we don't touch them. And if one wakes up, Reeves asked. Then we try again, Chen said. But we go in knowing what we're facing. We go in with the understanding instead of weapons. Reeves nodded. It was the only lesson they could take from the mistakes they'd made. Chen kept Zhao's ID badge. He wore it every day, a reminder of the cost of ignorance, of the cost of assuming something was a threat without understanding it. Sometimes he thought about going back to Mongolia, standing in that chamber, looking at that spot where the entity had hovered, and saying the words he should have said before Blake fired that shot. I'm sorry. Not for trying to stop it, but for not understanding it first. That was the real lesson. Knowledge before action. Understanding before violence. Because sometimes the monsters we create are worse than the ones we leave alone. And sometimes the greatest mistake is thinking you know what you are fighting. Thank you everyone for tuning in for this sinister tale. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe if I get a good response out of this video, I shall make more of these little spooky alien invasion tales for you. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's... By the way, I just want you to know I do that a lot when I'm reading these tales. That's why it takes me 4 hours to, get these things out. Anyways, if you enjoyed tonight's story, check out the rest of the channel, or tune in next week for another one. And yes, I totally left that blooper in there to give you something to laugh at. Have a good night. This is Raz. I'll talk to you guys next time. Good night. Ha 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 ha.